Let's turn to the story now. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme Administrator, Freeman Nomvalo, says his office has received complaints regarding alleged outstanding payments for private student accommodation. He says the situation has reached the point where some landlords are locking out students. Now, Nomvalo has made a plea to these landlords, certainly to heed the call and to cooperate. Let's find out how many of them are responding to this call. He joins us now for more on that story. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on data. You are urgently attending to this issue. I believe you issued a statement on the 3rd of May. It is 4 days later now. You are saying likely to be resolved mid-May. But what have you done, at least in the last 4 days, since receiving these complaints?
Good evening, Taban. Good evening to your viewers. In the last 4 days, we've put together a team that's going to attend to these queries as they come through the dedicated email that we provided. And today we were briefing that team in terms of the work that they need to do. We are still going to be getting more capacity in order to make sure that these matters are attended to as quickly as possible. So that preparatory work has been done in the last few days, but also a team that's going to start processing these matters is already on board.
Even with that assurance in place, are you still finding that students are being locked out, or are landlords heeding the clarion call not to disrupt teaching and learning via this frustration of locking students out of accommodation?
It's too early to tell. We haven't had anything over the weekend and today. We are hoping that the landlords would rather work with us and allow students a smooth attendance of classes.
How did we get here? I mean, there are varying stories, for example, of why the private student accommodation payments would have been outstanding. One is that they are deliberately being withheld, I beg your pardon. The NSFAS is weaponizing this particular process to get them to accept punitive, unrealistic, low rates that the scheme is proposing?
Look, there's people, when they don't receive their funds, are bound to come up with theories in terms of why do they think it is so. We all know the challenges that NSFAS has been facing, and these challenges are the ones that have led to this. There's an interface handshake between ourselves and institutions in terms of the data that is necessary for validation before payments are done. All of those factors are contributing to this, and the team that we're putting in place to attend to this will address the backlog as well as identify the weaknesses in the system so that we can address them going forward.
So part of that reason of them not being validated, they're saying it's because they are not agreeing to the imposed cap on rentals and the discrepancy between metro and non-metro residences.
Yeah, there's various categories, Thabo. It's not only those that are affected by the issue of the cap. There are those that are raising the issue of the cap, but there are others where the data validation issues are at play, and there are those where our inefficiencies are also at play. So there's various categories, and I wouldn't want to lump all of them in one reason.
So how are you confident then that these disputes, come the 10th of May, having been brought through the dedicated email for disputes, you will be able to address them before the end of the month?
Well, what we are saying is that let's get them by the 10th of May so that we can deal with them. I think where there's legitimate claims, it should be possible because the information to validate and process payments should be available. I'm not ruling out the possibility of some cases where it would be a little bit more complex and probably require more time to resolve. But we believe that with all of the information available, we should be able to resolve them by the end of the month.
Yeah. How far back does the backlog of outstanding payments go from your preliminary assessment?
It varies. I haven't really reviewed specific cases. But I've got letters and I've got allegations. I met a group of accommodation providers earlier in the week, in fact, yesterday morning. So some of them claim that it goes back to 6 months, 8 months, that type of time frame. So we do need to go deeper and understand this much better before we can make any bold statements about it. But we believe as long as these are legitimate, there should be data that supports them, and therefore it should be easy to validate them and process them.
I'm sure part of the things in your engagement that they would have brought to your attention is this challenge of them having to meet particular standardized, graded accommodation requirements at a cost that the rental does not provide for. For example, NSFAS putting a cap of 11% increase, rather, for metro residents and 9% for non-metro residents. And they're saying, but the operational costs are the same for providing this standardized graded accommodation level. How do you come to that conclusion that you can give them different increases?
Well, look, first and foremost, I think we all should be mindful that the resources available to government are limited, and therefore we do want providers to operate economically as well. We don't have unlimited resources. We do take the concern that it may not be economical in some instances, and we are responding to that. We're gonna put together a plan. I've just been here for three weeks, and I'm hearing that, and I've listened to it, and I'm gonna in the team that I'm gonna be putting in place, we're gonna be evaluating those claims so that we can then see if there's a need to review the policy position that is in place, and if that need arises, we will definitely have a look at it.
So you are addressing, I suppose, that question of consultation, because they say some of these measures were put in place without properly consulting the industry.
Well, going forward, we will definitely be consulting. At the moment, we have to deal with the outcome of past decisions and past practices that have resulted in the backlog.
And so far, many disputes have come through the email. Have you checked? Are the landlords responding to that? And in time for the 10th of May cutoff?
We have seen a few coming through, and we believe there's still going to be some coming because of the numbers that are claimed to be applicable in various parts of the country. But it is encouraging that we have seen a few submitting their claims already.
Yeah. And how many are you expecting in terms of the outstanding payments so far, in terms of the database that you have?
I do not want to speculate on those numbers. I would rather deal with the numbers as they come through.
All right.
But it is going to be a substantial number.
It is going to be a substantial number. And you believe you will have the resources to be able to at least address that situation to get the students back into the accommodation?
Our focus is helping our students, and therefore we've got to put every resource that we have at ensuring that this matter is dealt with. You can't allow a situation in which it continues to persist unaddressed. So we're going to put extra resources where necessary in order to address this matter.
So Alta is saying that, I mean, following the engagements with the associations of the landlords, that there needs to be a consideration of the precarious economic situation in which these businesses are operating, and you shouldn't be putting them at a situation where they've got to close down their businesses because of, I suppose, the challenges and some of the systemic issues that you're dealing with at NSFAS. How do you take that criticism?
Well, it is a fair observation on their part. Businesses do not operate on spirits or anything like that. They need financial resources in order to operate. That is the fuel that makes business operate, and that's how we have to make sure we address this problem. If we don't address it, businesses will close down, people will lose their jobs, and all of those things. We And most importantly, students will be left stranded. And our mandate is to make sure that students get education. Transformation in this country will not happen unless we do our part as NSFAS to contribute to that objective.
Mr. Freeman Nomvalo, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. The NSFAS administrator there, saying
Thank
they
you.
are certainly doing all they possibly can as urgently as possible to address the situation and return these students back into their places of accommodation. Still calling for the landlords to heed the call, certainly work with NSFAS in that particular matter. Right.